A single filament of ancient cyanobacteria clings to a grain of sand beneath an iron-rich lakebed, deep in what was once Earth's earliest ocean. The water is still and opaque, choked with dissolved iron that glows faintly in the dim light filtering through the surface. Around it, countless other microbes, simple, single-celled life forms thriving in darkness, breathing not air but chemicals drawn from rock and water, move like silent shadows beneath a world without oxygen. This is Earth as it had been for nearly 2 billion years, a planet of rusting seas and silent anaerobes, where the only breath comes not through lungs but through chemical reactions in their cell membranes. But this filament pulses with an unfamiliar energy. It divides, splits anew, releasing bubbles into the water that rise like whispers. Each tiny bubble is oxygen, a byproduct of photosynthesis, life's quiet revolution in motion. It is a gas that will change everything. In the stillness beneath the waves, something begins to stir beyond survival. It begins to threaten. The air above remains empty of breathable gases, but below, this new form of life is slowly poisoning its own world. The oxygen spreads like an invisible tide, reacting with iron in the water, forming rust that rains down over time and layers the seabed in red sediment. It coats rocks, stains ancient reefs, settles into strata like a silent warning. For aeons, Earth's biosphere has been adapted to function without free oxygen. This gas is poison to the very organisms that now thrive on it. And yet the change cannot be undone. The filament continues to split. The bubbles grow more frequent. Somewhere in time, somewhere beneath this stillness, something will awaken, not from death, but from the breath of life itself. Earth, 4 billion years ago, was a world shaped by fire and chemistry. The planet had cooled enough to allow liquid water to pool in vast oceans, cradling life in its embrace. There were no forests, no animals, no breath of air as we know it, only a thin veil of atmosphere rich in gases like methane and carbon dioxide, with barely a trace of oxygen. In this quiet, dim world, the first forms of life emerged, not from sunlight, but from chemical gradients near hydrothermal vents, or within shallow tidal pools where minerals catalyze simple organic reactions. These were microbes, single-celled organisms thriving without oxygen, surviving instead by metabolizing sulfur compounds and hydrogen sulfide in an environment that was profoundly anaerobic. The continents were sparse and shifting. Large land masses clustered into a single supercontinent, perhaps called Ur or Valbara, surrounded by a vast ocean known as Panthalassa. The seas were warm, teeming with microbial mats that carpeted the seafloor like living blankets. And among them, quietly persisting for eons, was a new kind of life, cyanobacteria, photosynthetic microbes capable of harnessing sunlight to split water and release oxygen as a byproduct. For billions of years, this process occurred on a small scale, its effects barely measurable in the atmosphere. But then something changed. Over time, these tiny organisms multiplied, spread through coastal shallows and open waters, and began producing oxygen at an unprecedented rate. The oceans became saturated with it, not just near the surface, but throughout their depths. This was no longer a mere chemical curiosity, it was an environmental revolution. As oxygen accumulated in the atmosphere and dissolved in seawater, it interacted violently with existing chemistry. Methane, which had once shielded life from ultraviolet radiation, began to break down. The very air itself grew toxic for anaerobic organisms. Those that could not tolerate oxygen found their metabolic processes disrupted or destroyed. The world was changing fast and catastrophically for the first time in Earth's history. What would follow was not just extinction, but a transformation so profound it would reshape life forever. The evidence of the Great Oxidation Event lies scattered across continents, preserved in layers of ancient rock that speak a language older than memory. The most direct clues come from banded iron formations, distinctive strata alternating between red hematite and dark magnetite, that formed when dissolved oxygen in early oceans reacted with iron ions. These rhythmic bands are not mere geological curiosities. They record the planet's chemical heartbeat, revealing periods of intense oxygen production followed by temporary lulls as biological activity waxed and waned. Geochemical analysis of these formations shows a sharp spike in oxygen levels coinciding with the disappearance of certain isotopes, particularly sulfur, 32 to sulfur 34 ratios, which are disrupted under oxidative conditions. This shift is detectable not just locally, but across rock layers from South Africa to Western Australia, giving credibility to a global phenomenon rather than a regional anomaly. In addition, ancient sedimentary rocks contain pyrite grains that formed in oxygen-depleted environments. Those same grains vanish abruptly after the event, replaced by oxidized minerals. This suggests a wholesale change in ocean chemistry, not gradual or localized, but sweeping and transformative. Isotopic signatures in carbon-rich shales further confirm the shift. As life began to exploit oxygen for energy, the balance of carbon isotopes changed, a signature that aligns with rising biological productivity driven by aerobic respiration. Perhaps most compelling are microfossils, tiny traces of ancient cyanobacteria preserved in stromatolitic structures from Western Australia and South Africa. These fossilized mats show a proliferation of photosynthetic organisms precisely when oxygen began to accumulate, linking cause and effect across time. While some interpretations debate the exact timing or pace of the event's onset, the convergence of geochemical data, mineral records, isotopic shifts, and direct biological fossils paints a remarkably consistent picture. It is not conjecture but layered evidence, each strand cross-verified through multiple independent scientific methods, that allows us to reconstruct one of Earth's most pivotal environmental transformations. In the shallow coastal flats of a world still young, life moved in quiet rhythm beneath the surface. A fisher's day began before dawn, when the air was cool and thick with mist rising from tidal pools. His hands, calloused and salt-stained, slipped through water that no longer felt safe to touch. Once rich with unseen creatures, now sharp with an invisible presence that made his skin tingle. He had learned to avoid the dark pools where the water smelled faintly metallic, like blood left in a basin. The elders said it was bad luck, but he knew better. Something in those waters killed without warning. His wife would stand at their low stone hearth, stirring broth from kelp and shellfish. She no longer trusted her hands to gather clams near the shore. Too many had been found with lungs full of air. They never breathed. They stored food in clay jars sealed tight against the wind, but even that was not enough. The air itself seemed to change, a sharpness when you breathed deeply, a dryness behind the eyes. Children coughed at night, and elders whispered about dreams where their skin cracked open like drying mud. They lived in low stone huts with roofs of woven reeds and sealed seams. No cracks for oxygen to enter, no way for breath to linger too long inside. Every morning they opened only one window, just enough to let out the old air before closing it again. They spoke little of what was happening beneath the waves or in the sky above, better not to think on things that could not be changed. Work was slow now. The fields near the coast had turned gray and lifeless. No roots would take hold where oxygen poisoned the soil. They moved inland, clearing land that had once been rich with mosses and fungi, now shriveled under a new kind of light. Some families left entirely, walking east toward hills they thought might be untouched. Still, each day was measured not by clocks, but by breath. How long one could hold it in the open air before coughing, how much fire needed to be banked just to keep warmth without burning too fast. They lived between worlds, the old world that once thrived beneath dark waters, and this new one, where life had to fight for every inhale, where survival meant learning not to breathe at all. The central dynamic of Earth's history, in all its quiet ferocity, lies in the tension between life and chemistry, between a planet that had long been anoxic and the biological innovation that would rewrite its atmosphere forever. For nearly 2 billion years, Earth's surface was dominated by anaerobic microbes thriving in environments devoid of oxygen. Their metabolic pathways were ancient, stable, and perfectly suited to their world. No free oxygen meant no oxidative stress, no need for protective enzymes, no high-energy electron transport chains. Then came cyanobacteria, simple yet revolutionary organisms capable of harnessing sunlight, not just to fuel growth, but to split water molecules, releasing molecular oxygen as a byproduct. This was not an accident. It was a metabolic breakthrough that, in time, became a planetary crisis. Oxygen, once a toxic waste product from most early life forms, began to accumulate in the atmosphere and oceans. The chemistry of Earth shifted irrevocably. Iron dissolved in seawater reacted with oxygen, forming rust-colored sediments, layers now preserved as banded iron formations, silent archives of this transformation. But more significantly, oxygen was a potent oxidant. For organisms adapted to life without it, exposure meant cellular collapse. Billions died not from predation or climate change, but because their very biochemistry was incompatible with the new atmosphere. This was mass extinction, silent, slow, and total in its scope. The great majority of Earth's biosphere at that time vanished, reduced to fossils buried beneath layers of oxidized rock. Yet out of this catastrophe emerged a different possibility: life adapted. Some organisms survived by evolving defenses against oxygen toxicity. Others learned to exploit it as an energy source, far more efficient than the ancient fermentation pathways. The shift from anaerobic metabolism to aerobic respiration opened up vast new energetic possibilities, laying the foundation for complex cellular structures and multicellularity. The disaster was not just ecological, it was evolutionary. What began as a biological accident became Earth's most profound environmental transformation, a cascade of death that made possible life on an entirely different scale. It began quietly, as most turning points do, hidden in the quiet churn of ancient seas. Cyanobacteria had been thriving for hundreds of millions of years, photosynthesizing sunlight into energy and releasing oxygen as a byproduct. At first, that oxygen was consumed almost immediately. It reacted with dissolved iron and other reducing agents in the oceans, forming rust-colored sediments known as banded iron formations. For a long time, the planet's chemistry held its breath, keeping oxygen levels low and stable, but over time, the balance tipped. As photosynthetic activity intensified, more oxygen was produced than could be absorbed by chemical sinks. The oceans began to saturate, then overflow. Oxygen spilled into the atmosphere in increasing quantities. This is where certainty fades and interpretation begins. No single moment marked the shift. It unfolded across millennia, a slow suffocation of an anaerobic world. The first casualties were likely microbial communities that thrived in oxygen-free environments, the very life forms that had dominated Earth for eons. Oxygen was poison to them. Its presence disrupted metabolic pathways, damaged cellular structures, and altered redox states essential to their survival. Evidence from rock strata shows a sharp decline in certain isotope ratios and organic carbon signatures, indicators of biological activity that correspond with the rise in atmospheric oxygen. Yet this extinction event was not total. Some life forms adapted. Others retreated into niches where oxygen could not penetrate, the deep sea, subsurface aquifers, or sealed sediment layers. But for those that survived, a new door had opened. Oxygen's presence allowed for far more efficient energy production through aerobic respiration, far greater than what fermentation or anaerobic pathways could yield. This was the transformation. The death of one biosphere made possible the emergence of another. The catastrophe wasn't just an end, it was also a beginning. Life, in its relentless adaptation, turned a planetary disaster into a new foundation. What had once been a toxic waste product became the very breath of complexity, setting the stage for eukaryotic cells, multicellularity, and ultimately, life as we know it. The full story of the Great Oxidation Event remains layered in uncertainty, as with any transformation spanning hundreds of millions of years. While we know oxygen levels surged dramatically, evidenced by red beds, banded iron formations, and isotopic shifts, the precise timing is still debated. Was it a sudden spike or a gradual rise? Some models suggest multiple pulses over tens of millions of years rather than one catastrophic shift. The evidence from ancient rocks is fragmented, often altered by geological processes that obscure the original signals. A common oversimplification is that cyanobacteria were solely responsible and acted with intent. This is misleading. They didn't decide to change Earth. Their metabolic activity was a natural consequence of biological innovation. But we cannot pinpoint exactly when they first evolved or how rapidly they spread across shallow seas. The fossil record for early microbes, especially those from before the oxygen surge, is sparse and open to interpretation. Another myth persists, that all anaerobic life vanished in an extinction event. In truth, some microbial lineages survived, perhaps in deep ocean niches, hydrothermal vents, or underground aquifers where oxygen never reached. The fossil record shows no sudden collapse of biodiversity. Instead, there's a slow turnover, suggesting adaptation over time rather than mass annihilation. Moreover, the role of geological processes like weathering and volcanic outgassing remains complex. Did increased oxygen cause feedback loops that accelerated its own rise? Or was it driven by biological innovation alone? The interplay between biology and geology is still being untangled. We also lack a complete picture of how life actually responded in real time, how organisms sensed changes or evolved new metabolic pathways. Molecular clocks suggest ancient origins for aerobic respiration, but the timing doesn't perfectly align with geological evidence. There's no definitive record of the first oxygen-tolerant cell or the mechanisms that allowed such transition. In short, while we understand the broad strokes, the rise of oxygen as a planetary transformation, we still grapple with its rhythm, causes, and consequences. The story is not one of simple villainy or victory. It is a tangled narrative, where science still seeks balance between data and interpretation. The Great Oxidation Event didn't end with a single moment, but settled into a new world, slowly, relentlessly shifting beneath life's surface. What had been a planetary emergency became the foundation of something else entirely, a biosphere restructured by breath itself. The oxygen that once poisoned ancient microbes became the currency of energy for an emerging order, a biological revolution not in form but in function. Cells began to harness oxygen not just as waste, but as fuel powering metabolism with unprecedented efficiency. This wasn't progress in any human sense, it was emergence, a recalibration of life's rules written into chemistry and time. What endures is not the catastrophe itself, but its aftermath, the quiet persistence of systems that survived by adapting to what had once been extinction. The deep oceans, where anaerobic life still clings in darkness, hold echoes of that earlier world, remnants of an atmosphere that no longer exists. And yet, even today, we breathe a sky sculpted by cyanobacteria long gone. Every breath is a testament to survival through transformation. We carry this event within us, not just in our blood and mitochondria, but in how we understand change. Not as inevitability nor as triumph, but as consequence. Life did not choose oxygen, it was forced into it, reshaped by conditions beyond its control. And yet, from that pressure came complexity, structures capable of thought, movement, memory. The same forces that threatened to erase life also made possible what we are. We study this event not for the drama of death, but for the quiet resilience and survival. It reminds us that transformation is never clean or kind. It is often devastating, even necessary. And so we live with a deeper awareness that our own world, too, is subject to change beyond comprehension. The air we breathe was once poison. We are here because something endured, not by design, but by staying.